Elijah,
Hello, Ben.
how are you doing?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm good. And then there were two.
Yes. Do you want to add the StreamYard link to the top of?
Yeah, I can do that.
Anyone on the Discord? The link is also in the book club channel.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, last week you weren't here, and now you're the only one here. Oh, there's Emma.
Hi.
Hey, Emma, how's it going?
Pretty good. How are you?
Pretty good as well. Glad to
Well, I
be
guess
back. I watched the discussion last week or 2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago.
Yeah. What did you think about it?
It was interesting. I'm trying to remember.
You hated all of it because you weren't there. I get it.
Sorry?
I said you hated all of it because you weren't there, right? You were like you're like the glue, you know? You just fall apart when you're not there.
And it sounded like, there were some, you're being very harsh towards Sachs, but other than that.
Oh, it's not gonna. I was disappointed this week too. So
No, let's keep it going.
maybe we should.
Here.
Yeah, this book feels like in its good moments, like it has some good stuff, but then a lot of the time it's very like, for lack of a better way to put it, Boomer scrambles for ways to maintain the status quo.
Yeah. It's very. It's just. I don't know. It feels like this is something I've noticed. It's like, wow, your favorite political system is supported by the Bible? That's crazy, dude. So, yeah. We'll give it maybe a couple minutes before we really start the discussion to let anyone else trickle in, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
I know Jonathan said that he couldn't be here.
Might not make it.
Yeah, and I know Jacob said also that he's not going to make it.
Jacob's been nonstop streaming all day.
Yeah, he's been saving. He said, okay, I'm not going to show up to the book club, so I need to expend my energy on other streams.
Yeah. We're the redheaded stepchild of the streams, so you want to join us.
And let me see.
So what do you guys think about maybe the next sections? I was looking, we have what, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more chapters, and then also maybe the epilogue.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we read like 3 and 3, or I know like if we read the next 3 chapters are like 70-ish pages. I just don't know if everyone will be able to
Might be a lot.
Yeah, hold to that.
Yeah, we did about 50, right? For this one.
Yeah.
And then, so 10, 11, that's 12, 30. And if we do 2,
It'll be about 50.
and then the next one would be 60.
So the end of the book is about 50 also.
Yeah.
Oh, wait. Let's see. 33 to 67.
Right, it comes out to like 50 and 60 or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Roughly.
That sounds good.
All right. Well, it looks like it's just the mighty trio.
I think we can make it.
All right. 1 Christian, 1 Jew, and 1 confused clown. So, all right, everyone, welcome back
Sounds
to
like a good mix.
the next instantiation of the Great Partnership, Science, Religion, and the Search for Meaning by Rabbi Jonathan Sachs. as of last week, we read The Politics of Freedom, Morality, and Relationships. So, here's
Oh,
Sandy.
here's Sandy.
Yeah, I'm sorry I'm late. I was debating whether to come or
You're
not.
good.
Well, it's not a book club without you, Sandy, so we're glad you're here.
Good
All
to
right,
see you.
anyone who's not Sandy, would you like to mention something about the book that you wanted to talk about?
All right, let's see. I had some notes. First sort of superficial note. Does anyone else feel like the left brain, right brain thing is something he picks up as a gimmick when it's inconvenient or when it's convenient and then forgets about the rest of the time?
Yes. He's
Reminds
like, oh
me
wait, the left brain, like right brain thing.
Because, like, all of a sudden at the end of one chapter, he was like, this is a very left-brained way of approaching things. And I was like, right, we're doing that. I forgot about that. I think it's the end of chapter 8.
Yeah.
8.
He
Oh,
talks about
9.
morality, and then he's like, oh.
Yeah, I remember that.
all I've noted at the end of chapter 8 is the final line.
Maybe it was a different chapter. I do not remember. Oh, it was chapter 7.
I was gonna say that would make more sense. Okay.
It's like revolutionary politics are left-brain things.
I got lost in the politics.
Oh.
And a little bit lost in family history and how things get presented differently depending on which people group you're from and how they remember it.
That sounds like an interesting tangent, though.
Yeah, leave it for tangents. I need to wake up and have a bit more coffee.
I did have one thing I wanted to know what everyone else thinks. He says, I don't know what page it's on because I'm using an ebook.
Mhm.
But it's towards the end of chapter 7. Philosophy is about truth as system. The Bible is about truth as story.
Oh, yeah.
And I want to know what other people think about that statement.
So philosophy is truth as system.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, the first thing that comes to mind to me is thinking about the 4 P's of knowledge. Is it the 4 P's of knowledge? I'm confused.
Participatory, yeah.
It's something about philosophy, or at least I don't know if that would be the modern sense of philosophy and how that's more propositional. It's like it's systematized, but it's not grounded in a sense in behavior, experience, perspective, which kind of leads to or is what narrative is comprised of. Right? It's the I think somewhere else in the book doesn't he say something about there's a difference between maybe behavior and action. Behavior is something that's more is general, and action is something a behavior that you take for the purpose of something like that.
Say it again, Emma.
Philosophy is about truth as system. The Bible is about truth as story. If you want, I can read the whole paragraph.
Yeah. Oh, you know what? I have so many notes on this section, this whole section of the book. I again kind of got stuck in the first chapter, but part of that is because it really strikes me as, let me see. What did I write? I wrote beside that paragraph, is it seen this way now? It reminds me of stuff from CRC conversations and people calling others woke. And is this an argument that needs recovering?
Interesting.
Yeah, story is kind of one of the things that was vilified a bit. Too much story, too little politics. So,
Proposition.
yeah, probably that.
Too much story?
In the context that I hang out in from my where I had been going to church. And I've been thinking about that for a while because I love writing and I love stories.
Hey, Trey.
Hey, so I've been thinking about and the fact that so much of what I actually love about reading through the sorry, I'm going to forget the names of it. What we call Old Testament in the Christian circles, not just the Torah, but the other portions. It's all story. The whole thing is story. So I'm thinking, where did we shift from story being how we relate to story being something that gets in the way of practical purposes?
Hey, just kind of what were you saying? You kind of broke up there at the end.
Oh, it's okay. I was replying to Emma wants to read the top paragraph. If she doesn't, I will.
Yeah,
What
I
do you
can
mean by
read the paragraph.
story? What do you mean? How do you relate to
Have
story?
you read the book?
I've read a review of it on Times of Israel, but I have not read the book now.
Okay, then
Okay.
you wouldn't know her because she's talking about top of page 140. You can get it in Internet Archive, right?
Oh, you can?
I think so. Or where are you reading it, Emma? You said you're
I
reading
just
it.
got it from my library
Oh,
as
shoot.
an ebook.
As an ebook. Okay, maybe you can't. I know we could the other book that we were reading. So, yeah. Try and
Hey,
get
welcome,
it. It's a good
welcome
book.
and try. Are you allowed to use your car or your phone in the car like that?
He's just listening.
What are you, the police?
Okay, I'm not the one giving tickets here.
So,
Well, I don't know.
All right.
You're 15 and a half.
who's
Hey, you got
reading it,
other
Emma?
things to worry
You or
about.
me?
I'll read it.
Okay.
Philosophy since
I'll tune
Plato
out.
has
I might be
found.
back later.
Okay. Philosophy since Plato has found time a difficult idea. Time, said Plato, is a moving image of eternity. Philosophical truths are timeless. They belong to a heavenly realm in which nothing ever changes. Philosophy is about truth as system. The Bible is about truth as story. Systems are theoretical constructs, but stories are about people and the time it takes for them to change. Revolutions inspired by philosophy attempt the impossible, to create a new social order overnight.
Right.
So, and that is part of point 1 he's making about something. I couldn't find where it said 1, but right under that it says the second of whatever points he was making. So, so it really ties into what I wrote a billion notes beside on the page before.
Yeah, it's the paragraph right before the one I read. The Bible and philosophy have a different sense of time, and these are the reasons that, like, the fact that the English and American revolutions were inspired by the Bible means that they ended better than the French and Russian revolutions, which were inspired by philosophy.
And it's one of the things I did look up on my lunch break again, like as I was going back through here, about because my dad's Scottish and my mom's family's English, and I'm thinking I don't remember having it described exactly that way.
Oh, yeah.
So I looked it up. So we're right beside where it talks about the difference between them. That paragraph right in the middle of 139. I wrote down the years because he's making his points above that as far as history getting no replays kind of thing in the paragraph above. And then I wrote in 1688 to 89, King James, who's Catholic. and I looked up emailed myself a couple of articles on the root causes of the uprising and stuff to read later. And both of them did mention difficulties around the fact he was Catholic, but there was also the mention of that thing that makes me wonder about what I mentioned about Story and the note I made on the following page, because it was very much about power. He was having this thing with Ireland, apparently, and they're still having a thing with Ireland. You know, like, I mean, really, that's not over and done with.
Nope.
And yeah, and one of them said part of it was also about his use of the government. It was also about money, because he was like spending money on the things that mattered to him, like gaining power over the Irish and making them all
Right.
And I'm like,
Well,
okay, so why are we still doing this? Because I feel
still
like
doing what?
instead of what it said on the top that you read on the top of the page, why are we still? And I don't know, maybe I've got to read through. So where did you find the point one? Does he say, or is it just, I would
Yeah,
suggest
it's a paragraph right above that. I would suggest 3 reasons. The first.
Got it. Okay, so I'm going to put a 1 beside there. I've decided I'm going back to marking my books up like when I was in school. It's like, I'm sorry, but
Hey, that's why I like ebook copies.
why? Because you can mark them up and it doesn't show?
Yeah, but pretty much. I can mark them up and not feel bad because I can just erase it later if I want.
Yeah, so so in that paragraph at 139 on the bottom, and it talks about the time, like, you know, like that whole thing about time. The message of, you know, like Exodus to Deuteronomy. So that's a big message, you know, to take the Israelites out of Egypt. It took 40 years to take Egypt out of the Israelites. And I'm like, you know, aren't we talking about those kind of things today with all of the stuff about the meaning crisis and where have we gone? And everybody's talking about different sides and how we approach things.
I think he's talking about messiness.
About which?
Messiness.
Oh, messiness. I don't know anything about messiness.
Well, I think that's what he's talking. I think he's talking about when Jacob says. I think I'm quoting Jacob when he says, like, when you go to church and you go to the synagogue and you see people and you meet people. Everywhere is people, and people are messy. They're not theories. And you need to figure out how to do certain things in your context.
Yeah.
I feel like Chazi and I were kind of talking a little bit about that, something like that in, like in the Pirkei Avot, in the Ethics of the Father stream, about justice and truth and shalom. And something about how you can have something where you can have truth, and you can have these things where, let's say you have a way of doing things, right? The right way of doing things, like the halachic way of doing things from a Jewish perspective. But you also have the context of how to do that while keeping shalom bayit, which, let's say, so like the peace in the house, right? It could be with your wife, or it could be with, like, you know, in your community. And you might need to stagger your efforts in terms of, like, you have an ideal that you need to reach. In theory, that's the ideal, but the way you get there might be different for each individual.
I'm waiting for you to fill that out more because it's a beautiful thing. Guess we have to go listen to Pirkei Avot.
I don't know if anybody else has anything that they think they can add to this.
So, like, that means, like, and like what Ben just said, on page 140, like, the whole thing down that whole page is like in this chapter, he's talking so much about how we get to that place, how we balance things out. Like his second point there on in the second paragraph on 140, he's talking about and he said it, and so I noted it because he already talked about it, and now he's saying it again. That the biblical politics places a huge emphasis on civil society, strong families, supportive communities, voluntary associations, philanthropic endeavors, and the like. This is the great strength of Britain and America, as Burke and Alex de Tocqueville saw and said. I'm looking at this and going, I come from that British background. I'm so not seeing this. I'm thinking, yeah. Although family and things are important, but yeah, maybe that is the strength. I just remember kind of the jostling and the, for place and the whole stuff that I mentioned before. Like, I totally get King James, like there was a whole power struggle in my family constantly growing up, and they'd smile, they'd use your typical British sarcastic humor and whatnot, but it was still a power struggle. So, and I look at is so that, but that's the thing, is like when I read in the Hebrew scriptures, there is not like a single story. I don't think there's a single story throughout that whole book that doesn't touch on this place and give me hope, because, that's life. There's more life in that place than there is in just quickly agreeing to something that isn't solved. I love this. You know what I mean by that?
That it talks about challenges and like how people, yeah.
Sorry, I cut you off. Say it.
No, I was just curious to understand what you're saying is like. Isn't that just like a trope in entertainment and storytelling where people like flawed characters, right? Right. When you write a character for a TV show or something, you can't. That's kind of like the Superman story, right? Like Superman can't be just like infinitely strong and without any weaknesses. That's not something we can relate to, and it has no. There's nothing unpredictable about that, right? So it's kind of like somebody. It's also kind of like the free. It's kind of this argument about free choice or free will.
Yeah, I'm thinking one discussion doesn't even begin to touch on that place. Yeah, like because he's like this whole thing about freedom. It's like it's not a. It screams that it isn't what we get told it is in the simple form, And I didn't realize this because we had such varied interpretations of what freedom even is. This chapter really kind of walks through some of those things, Like in the bottom of the page, he's going through that whole thing, different ways biblical and revolutionary politics understood the concept of rights. Two of the greatest writers on liberty in the mid-20th century, Friedrich Hayek in The Constitution of Liberty and J.L. Tallman in Origins of Totalitarian Democracy, distinguished English and French approaches to liberty. Says that the English approach was gradual, evolutionary, mindful of history and respectful of tradition. French was perfectionist, philosophical, even messianic in a secular way. For the French revolutionaries, there was an ideal template of society that can be realized by the application of politics to all spheres of life. The English, by contrast, knew how small of all that human hearts endure, that part which laws or kings can cause or cure. Yeah. That's a big deal. At least it is to me. Maybe it's just a big deal to me.
No, I think it is a big deal. I've heard someone about sometimes less like
You're breaking in and out a little bit, Emma.
Yeah.
headphones broke.
Headphones broken.
One sec.
Let's say, can you manage without?
Yeah. I mean, in the meantime, I can mention that, and this, I think it's just connected. I think it's connected, but I really enjoyed him talking about the group, the bringing up the individual rights versus and group responsibility.
Trey,
I
mute
think
yourself.
I'm hearing Trey's car, but the
Yeah, I just muted you.
individual rights and what was the other part?
Individual rights and group responsibility, and I think that plays into the freedom that you were talking about, where maybe the emphasis is on one kind of freedom, which is your individual freedom, individual rights to do this and that, this and that. But that is within certain constraints, which are the group responsibilities. Right? And I really like also how Verveke was talking about this. He said something about you have freedom to and freedom from. And I feel like that's connected. I can't entirely connect that, but there's this different sense of freedom.
I always forget that Verveke talks about that, actually.
The freedom from and to.
Yeah.
Elijah knows how to explain that 100%. I'm gonna bet that he knows how to explain that one.
Yeah, I mean, I think Isaiah Berlin talks about this with positive and negative rights, right? A positive right is a right to something. A negative right is kind of the Bill of Rights, American style things.
I don't think that's quite what Verveke's getting at when I've heard him talk about that. I've heard it used before by other people, at least, as freedom from is like, yes, it's the concept of like negative rights where you're free from interference, but freedom to is rights connected with responsibility. Whereas when people talk about positive rights, I often hear like the right to food, like someone owes you that, as opposed to like I have this right and I have this responsibility along with it. Maybe I just hear them, like I associate them with two very different circles, and I'm just confusing everyone. Sorry.
Oh, no. I think there's that kind of ties into how I was just simply seeing it as I think that one of the things I've learned in the last few years is that you have more freedom when rights are shared than you have when you try to speak about them individually, because it means that you're working things out together, which is that whole what we were talking about above.
What do you mean shared?
Okay, so I don't know if it fits exactly with what Rabbi Sachs is using as an example, or what Elijah was explaining. I've really been comparing a lot of things lately to my relationship with my ex and my relationship with Jack. And in the first one, there was always this sort of line of division between things. Everything is in either here or there, it's kind of in or out sort of thing. And the areas where we worked things out together were not necessarily like we would work things out together for how to get to the hospital for my son. Could I get a ride part way? Could we do this? Could we do that? There's tangible moment by moment things that you can work out, and rights within a relationship fall into those categories of what do you justifiably expect from the other person. And when there's a line of division where it's set up like a contrast, you really see that differently. When I was in my relationship with Jack, we were very messy. We were very aware that we came from messy situations, and we're trying to build something in the midst of coming from really messy situations. And the thing that always struck me was the point at which he said, you know, we've worked through some really tough stuff together, and we've built a strong relationship. When I read this page in the place you opened about story in contrast to system, yeah, story versus system. You can't have a story without working out the details, the elements. A system can function the way my ex liked, where you create a system, everything's in or out, it has a place, it works, it functions, but you don't necessarily, in the course of it doing its thing, think about how you problem solve things. A system is designed to function. It's not designed to problem solve itself. Whereas a relationship and the extended relationships of community are. That's what we're supposed to do. And that's what Jack taught me. That there's value. In fact, there's greater value in knowing that you kind of came into something, you know, with a hard task ahead of you because of some of the limitations you bring to it. Then when you create something strong out of people and personal resources that are limited in nature, and you do something well, that it's even better than if you came into it strong. That kind of thing. So when I say freedom is better together, a freedom worked out together is in poor relationships, and especially in poor relationships within poor structures, there's a lot of judgment that goes on, and there's a lot of self-judgment that goes on trying to figure out where you fit and how you place. But in a relationship where you're coming at it with assuming value on all sides, and you just simply look at the problems to be solved as problems to be solved, there is huge freedom there. And that's what I read in the Bible when I'm reading stories of David, and when I'm reading the stories. It's like, you know, you can sit there and, you know, argue about, you know, but should be Moses' right to go into the thing. He spent 40 years in the desert doing X, Y, and Z. We would do that. This is how we handle things today, you know, but that's not how God relates to his people, or his people relate to God. That's not what I read there. And that's what I love about it. And I saw Jack as functioning very much from within that kind of framework, things he would say to me. And I'm like, I had no idea how valuable this kind of freedom is.
I hadn't thought about that before. I like that.
Now, if I could only clean my kitchen.
One step at a time.
One step at a time. Yeah. But anyway, those are the things I loved in this chapter. Those were the 2 pages. I have lots of notes, but those 2 pages got a lot of notes. And of course, page 134. Page 134, where he's describing what a covenant is. Yeah, that's something I think about a lot, also from background messiness. And I'd love to have a long conversation about some of that sometime, but it's not like it doesn't come up a lot.
Yeah, covenant seems pretty important.
Can you give me I don't remember the insight here.
Oh,
What's the gist? What's the lowdown on why it's important?
covenant
Yeah.
to Emma, or To what,
Whoever wants to
I
take a
was-
shot at it. Yeah.
I was just referring to like kind of in general. He talks about it a lot. Other people talk about it a lot.
A covenant is like just like an agreement between, like a trusting agreement or something like that.
I'll read you page 133. Bottom paragraph. Not that it doesn't, there's stuff before this, but so the bottom paragraph. Covenant is the most radical attempt ever undertaken to create a politics of freedom by taking all by taking all sovereignty out of human hands altogether. Whoever governs in Israel does so only under authority delegated by God on the one hand, the people on the other, and can be criticized and dethroned for exceeding that authority. That is why, simultaneous with the birth of monarchy in biblical Israel, the prophet, a social critic with the right to criticize kings in the name of God, was born. The right of opposition, first embodied in the prophet, as the man or woman mandated to speak truth to power in the name of God, is fundamental to the free society. So that's what I'm kind of thinking, like it relates to why I like page 139 and 140. It has to do with freedom.
Yeah, it sounds also kind of like the rights and responsibilities, right? Like the king has the power to do lots of different stuff. And the prophet is there to remind him, well, there is something above you that you are responsible towards, I guess, right? There are constraints within which you work in. Yeah. So I guess I'll share this. I was just on the topic of these rights and responsibilities, and I shared this article, I think, in somewhere on the Discord, and it's kind of a commentary that Sachs has about one of the parashot, like the Torah portions that we read. And basically, what he talks about there is in the beginning of one of the portions, it talks about the daughters. I'll just give you the gist. It talks about the daughters of Tzlofchad, of this guy that was given. He's in a certain tribe of Israel, and he was giving land. And he had no sons; he just had daughters. But by the halacha that they received by then, at that point, the ownership goes to or flows through the sons. So the daughters went to Moses and asked him, like, our father only has daughters, so we're not going to get any land. So how is this fair? Like, we need to do something with that. So Moses says, maybe it seems like you have a point, and he goes to God, and then God gives him the halacha, gives him another decrees about this new rule that he gives him. And the rule is that if there is no son heirs, then the daughters will receive it. So there's a few conditions, and so that comes to be. And this starts at the beginning, and the whole story unfolds disconnected from this. Then at the end, it brings it again. And the way it brings it again is that there's somebody else from the tribe of these daughters says, listen, if these daughters are going to receive the land that was owed to their father, and this is land that belongs to our tribe, and then they go marry another dude from a different tribe, then that land will go to that different tribe, and it would leave our tribe. So at that point, they talk about the, let's say, compromise or the added law there that says basically, okay, so the daughters will receive the land that they are owed, but that is only true if that means that they need to marry someone from within their own tribe. Right? So it puts a constraint on them based on the halacha that was given at the beginning of the story. And Sachs talks about how this is kind of like how the Torah emphasizes the rights that were given to the daughters. But then it tells us also, well, with those rights, you have these shared responsibilities that you need to to abide by, right? So that things are manageable, so that things are actually, so that the whole community or the tribe can still cohere and receive what it is owed and stuff like that. So I thought that was a really good example of how these rights and responsibility play out.
It is. It teaches people to talk in terms of what the truth is that they're advocating around, because they spoke up saying the land is being delegated to the different tribes, and each of the sons is a representative of that tribe. Will get will have land designated to them, and they go and they say, but we won't, but our family, not just me personally, but our family won't receive this because we are not allowed to receive it on their behalf.
Mm-hmm.
Is basically what they're saying. And then it circles around to go, and that's right. And if you're only receiving it on their behalf, you have responsibility to care for it on their behalf.
Right.
And that includes, which is really covenant and rights and freedoms, like you were saying earlier. And I think that's my story earlier doesn't explain that principle, but it does kind of run on some of that principle of how you hold things in care, like, and within a marriage, you're supposed to hold each other in care. And you see that not happening. So like the principle's still there, just the broader the context, the bigger and the different types of relationship that Sachs talks about here. It may manifest differently to a degree in how we think it applies, but it's always going to apply the same truth to the principle. Because, people will say, yeah, but then why does God change his mind? No, he didn't. He just said, you're absolutely right. This is what I said. And you're right. That doesn't work. So how are we going to make it work? Because he's not changing his mind. Is he? Is he changing his mind? I don't see that.
Not in that particular instance. I think the commentary on that is that is one of two laws that are given later on, which is this one. And then before that, the second Passover, which gives people a second opportunity to do a sacrifice they couldn't do because they were impure at the moment. And basically what I think the most common commentary is that it's God relishing the fact that people care enough that they say, hey, this is like, we really want to do this. Like we really care about, the first thing is like, we really care about doing the sacrifice and we couldn't do it for the first time. So can we do it? Right. And then he says, well, yeah, you can actually. So, and thank you for asking. And here you go. Here's the way you can do it. And I feel like that's kind of like life is so, I've had this happen to me. This is one of those rules that is kind of like through experience of it's been ingrained in me of like asking 3 times for everything, because people will just tell you no, or I don't know, or they don't necessarily care enough the first time you ask them about it. And then you ask them again, and then you ask them again, and then and then suddenly something actually happens. So it's like knocking. Sometimes you need to knock a few times in order to get what you want. And sometimes that's a sign that you actually care enough, right? It's a test, maybe. Elijah has something to say about that.
I was just thinking, man, you probably are the best project manager for your team. That's all I'm thinking about. Man, Ben's a great project manager.
That's a great insight, a project insight.
Exactly.
But it also means that if they ask me for something, I'll probably just say no until they ask me.
Exactly. You have to ask him 3 times.
That's how you know that it's actually needed.
I mean, you that's probably one way that people kind of like, right? Like if we don't ask enough, like I have other people that are asking me for things and they're like bothering me way more than you are bothering me.
I think that's the Israeli in you, actually.
Maybe.
Well, okay, so because I'm just critical, I'll just mention something that I didn't understand. So on 132, Rabbi Sachs kind of like, I guess, a paragraph that's actually fully on the page. He says, "Power is a fundamental assault on human dignity." However, on page 135, that little top ending of a paragraph, he says, "The sovereignty of God is strong enough to set limits to human ambition."
Okay.
And so it seems like, well, that means that God's sovereignty is a fundamental assault on human dignity.
I guess he didn't say human power. I'm pretty sure he meant human power, but he didn't specify.
Sloppy Rabbi Sachs.
If we're gonna talk about him being sloppy, I have a bone to pick too. But
And then he also says,
I have notes.
he also says in that the strength of Abrahamic politics, that through its vision, that though its vision is religious, its conception of power is secular. But I found this also kind of hard to take because, like, what is a judge then? And also, if he says, for example, like, how do you have a covenant with like God giving you rights, but then also call it secular?
yeah, I
That one?
had an issue with that paragraph too, because he literally says rulers, kings, and emperors are not holy, and I'm like, but they receive their power from God, but they're not holy.
Oh,
Yeah, so I just didn't
Well,
think
I
that
mean,
this was coherent.
but I mean, does that, if you receive, I mean, we all receive in some sense our power from God, right? So, I mean, we're not all holy, or, I mean, no, you need to do something specific. I mean, you have the spark of holiness, or you can do something to make it holy, or make yourself pure enough to do something holy, but it's a dynamic. I feel like, isn't it? Like
I
it's not
guess
something intrinsic.
it might be a definitions thing. Then that's a good point if you're looking at holiness that way. I'm not sure everyone does.
Yeah, I didn't find that statement to be very offensive. I'm more concerned about, or I was more annoyed by the just conception of politics that I didn't feel like made much sense.
That it's secular.
Well, yeah, I just don't know how we can. I just don't know what secular means in that sense. Then, if you get your rights from God and you have a secular government,
hey, so I made a note beside rulers, kings, and emperors are not holy. Where was the other bit you mentioned?
I think it's the beginning of that same paragraph.
The one,
Yeah.
the one that starts the irony as well as strength of Abrahamic politics.
Mm-hmm.
That its vision is religious, its conception of power is secular. That one, okay.
Yeah.
Judaism expressed this by its principled distinction between kingship, government, and priesthood, religion. Priests must never hold political power. Christianity did so somewhat differently by its statement, "Render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's." The vision that drives this secularization is religious through and through. It says that power is not to be sacralized. Rulers, kings, and emperors are not holy. They are there to serve, not to be served. All power is subject to the overarching imperatives of the right and the just. The moment it oversteps those limits, it is ultra vires and may rightly be opposed. So I have a lot of notes on these few pages too, and questions. But I'll read you a couple of the things I underlined. Just on 132, I underlined a few of the words in the second full paragraph down. Abrahamic monotheism is based on the idea that the free God desires the free worship of free human beings. So I underlined each of those things that he listed as free. Historical drama of the Bible turns on the question of how to translate individual freedom into collective freedom. I think Ben mentioned that earlier. How do you construct a free society without the constant risk of the strong dominating and exploiting the weak? That is the issue articulated by the prophets, and it was never completely solved. Politics is a problem for the Bible, precisely because it believes that no human being should exercise coercive force over another human being. Politics is about power, and Abrahamic faith is a protest against power. I underlined the bit about Abrahamic faith being a protest against power. Down the bottom paragraph where he's talking about can political order exist without the use of power, and he's talking about different people, I underlined promising is the fundamental moral act. When I promise, I voluntarily agree to bind myself. It is this ability of humans to commit themselves to do or refrain from doing certain acts that generates order in the relations between human beings without the use of coercive force. I alluded to that in my contrast between my ex and Jack. So then when I've got an asterisk, I've got a little star and an exclamation point between the first sentence in the big paragraph on 133. A free political order is possible only when the fundamental political act is a mutual promise between governor and governed. I underlined that because I think of things in terms of relationships, and I've built a lot of my understanding of some of the questions that come up in both book studies now, actually, in terms of how my relationships went and the things that I learned from interacting with people. So when I turn over to 134 with those in mind, that's the whole thing with the covenant stuff. I had underlined the beginning of the sentence. Covenant was reborn as the key idea of new politics of the 16th and 17th centuries. In Calvin's Geneva, of course, which I kind of smirked at myself for underlining that being important because of some of my issues around the Calvinists. The middle paragraph is good, but I also underlined covenant always has a narrative, which we talked about and Ben talked about. In the case of the Bible, it is the story of the Exodus. In the case of the United States, it's about a journey from oppression to freedom in the New World, the almost promised land. And then in the bottom, I underlined the beginning. Covenant is politics scored for the right brain. It's based on storytelling, not abstract theory, which I kind of also talked about. So I'm kind of like, the stuff he said about the contrast, like about politics, it's hard to read, but it does tie in with the other stuff we talked about. And I do think it's kind of important because we don't seem to be getting it, like we're still having political issues, and even making them political issues around faith, which I think is the one thing that God wanted not to happen because he designed the system to have them balance out. Your prophets should always be able to go to the king and give the king an earful when he needs it. And we don't really work in that sense. And the people that are counting themselves as prophets, which I know within Christianity, there's a big kind of charismatic place around that. They tend to think of themselves as being the people with power instead of the people who need to humble themselves before God and just go and relay what they're hearing and let the people that are supposed to be delegating the power actually delegate it. So I'm kind of going, I don't know. I think we've kind of really taken the mess and, and messed it more. But that's, I don't know. That's how I think. I don't know what you guys see in.
I don't know. I don't think I have anything to add in terms of like the groups, the responsibility and the rights. Trying to think if I don't know if we want to see if there's anything about the next. I think did we touch the next chapter, the morality?
Not
No.
yet.
Wait,
Let's
Wait.
get Trey in to have a politic discussion.
yes, I want to have my politics discussion. I feel like there's an innate conflict between religion and freedom, and I don't understand how Rabbi said that. I mean, the reason we have, okay, correct me if I'm wrong, but I was reading up at least on Orthodoxy, and Orthodoxy, the tensions were Christians were pushing the idea of secularity, or like the modern day Jews at the time were like, hey, we sort of need our courts for a reason. We need them to enact our laws. And if we don't have the ability to enact our laws, then we don't have Judaism. And that's where a lot of the splits came from. And I feel as though you can't really say that freedom is something that is championed within religion when we have like all these skirmishes on like, can women speak in church? You know, can we allow homosexuals to exist and everything like that? And I feel like Rabbi Sachs sort of wants to look at the good parts, but not look at the bad parts.
Curiosity question. What is the purpose of the courts? Like I always think about now, I hadn't really realized before, but people here when they talk about Noahides, there's all of the laws that God started out with Adam, and then he adds in and you must establish courts. So that's an important principle of following God. So you mentioned the courts. I'm curious, what's the deal there? Yeah.
I don't know what's up with Jewish courts. All I know is that like there are such things as courts being enacted by God for personal decisions. I don't know. I'm not a court guy. I don't know.
I mean, laws by God, laws by random people. Unless you are an anarchist, seems like there will always be law.
I mean, laws and judges. I mean, that's. And again, I'm no expert, right? So, but that is, if you think about it as part of a Noahide law, or it's almost in the Torah, that's like something that's so obvious in terms of something that should be obvious to you. Like one of the things that should be obvious to every person is that you need to have judges and a court system so that you can so that they can figure out right from wrong. It's the basic stuff. I don't know if that helps. I mean, so what I'm saying is that the courts are not only there to decree the laws of God. There is basic stuff that we are doing. It's not outside of God, but it's less. But I think there is still something that's separated there a little bit, where it's like is helping us as a society to figure out things together, and that's like a basic function of how a community works out.
I'm not saying it's not necessary. I'm not saying that it's not important, but you can't say like, again, true freedom, like, is the opposite of religion. Like, I think we have to admit that. Like,
what's your definition of freedom?
Okay, clown, you want me to give a very specific answer within these 5 seconds on a very large, broad topic? Fine. To not have any resistance from doing an action.
Okay. Well, I think I mentioned this before, but that's not the only definition. I mean, classically, it was something like to be able to like achieve your ends properly, or to do like to bring yourself to the ultimate good, right? Because I don't know, you live in LA. I lived
Yep.
on the West Coast, right? You go to Skid Row and you see a bunch of people shooting up heroin or
Yes.
meth. Like, are you free when you're addicted to heroin?
Yes.
Really?
So
I
I
have
mean,
a question too.
Let me explain again. I think when you gave that first example, there's the idea of God already baked into it. That there's some good design for it. But if we're talking about what it has mostly meant, like if we think of liberty and we think of libertarians, it pretty much means I can do whatever I want. I'm not saying, again, the idea that we have to have perfect definitions or that all of our nice definitions have to be good. I don't think that has to be true. We could say that full freedom is not good for most people. But if you're saying that if you want freedom, religion is going to stop you from that. I think that's a fair thing to say.
I think if you agree to the libertarian definition of freedom, you can say that. But I just don't think that that's the only definition of freedom around. So,
Right. But we want to say the commonplace definition, not our own secret definitions, right?
well, at one point in time, the libertarian definition was the secret definition.
But it ain't now. So
That's true, Trey. That's true.
That's a pretty recent development, though.
But as Trey said, it ain't true now.
Well, again, he's not writing a book about using. He doesn't. Okay, he's writing a book now. He is writing a book about the definition of the term freedom and then how it doesn't apply. I don't remember him reading it and him giving his own definition of freedom.
Yes.
I think he presupposed. Does he give his own definition of freedom?
I don't think so. Not that I can remember.
Okay, so I'm right on that. So he's presupposing our current definition.
I'll add that to the list of the things Trey is right on. Don't worry.
I'm not right on a lot, but
list
give me
somewhere.
that.
But on that point, you're gonna hold yourself to it.
Yeah.
I have a question, unless Ben had one before I did. I wasn't sure if he was going to ask you something.
I don't have any specific. I have many things that I'm thinking about, but nothing too specific.
Okay, so Trey, I think I heard you say that freedom. Well, I don't remember your sentence, but you basically contrasted two things: freedom being lack of resistance, like resistance blocks you doing the action you want. Therefore, if there's resistance, which religion's fitting in as, I guess, then there's no freedom. Is it something like that, or did I get that correct?
Yes, but I don't think freedom is a virtue. I don't think we should have full freedom. I think we should have responsibility, right? Freedom is not a virtue.
Well, just completely based on your definition that you confirmed, freedom is it cannot be a virtue because in that sense, because I debated showing up here tonight because of neck and shoulder damage, muscle tensions, the inflammation and stuff. And one of the big things I learned working out, trying to work the muscles in physiotherapy is that if there is no resistance, like every single movement, every single action, every single something has the forward movement and the counter movement, the thing that holds it in place, that thing that creates the appropriate dynamic. Whereas when I think of freedom without restraint, it reminds me of when I visit my ex recently since his stroke, and he tries to move his good arm. But when he goes to direct it to a certain spot, instead of going there, it flings itself and it'll fling his coffee cup across the room, because that component that is supposed to be active, that creates the resistance to give him control over the movement, is not properly functioning. So based on what you said, I'm thinking, no, absolutely not. There has to be only freedom within restraint, because if there is not freedom within restraint, then we're living in a broken world where everything falls. Like there's just no, and maybe Rabbi Sachs is coming at it because he's bringing this into the contrast of science and religion and how they work together. Like there is a very logical sense in which restraint must be a component of freedom. Did you work out?
I think you nailed it, Sandy.
Too much listening to all the chatter on the practices channel. Jacob's Discord. I'm sorry.
It's okay. You just wrecked him,
You just
Sandy.
destroyed Trey.
No. Trey knows I love him. Go work out, Trey. Think about it. Oh, I do not advocate pain as a teacher to people if you can possibly avoid it by learning in much more efficient ways than I have, but it certainly is a teacher.
Oh my goodness.
Oh
Allow me to clear up one thing. I was not streaming the entire day. In fact, I streamed for less than an hour because it was Rabbi Khan's, yard site.
I saw part of that while getting my dinner.
That's all the streaming that I did today. My channel was filled with streams, but apparently Emma didn't watch any of them because she's like, he was streaming all day.
I did mean your channel. I'm sorry. I will be more clear in my language next time.
I mean, I didn't watch them either because I didn't know what Emma was. I just took her word for it. So
I was on one of those streams. I could have corrected you, but I didn't.
Is there a reason why Kirk isn't allowed into the room?
Oh, I thought he was coming back.
Oh, okay.
He hasn't read the chapter yet.
Oh, so if he hasn't read the chapter, then we shouldn't let him back in. Yeah.
And he also,
Was he being disruptive? I haven't been watching any of this. I started watching the beginning of it while Trey was coming back.
I don't know, Elijah. Was he being disruptive? Because when I challenged him on whether he'd read the chapter,
it's okay. Sandy laid down the law like usual.
Sandy was being mean to people. Why are you always so mean to people, Sandy?
Yep, definitely Sandy's specialty.
She just wrecked Trey, but other than that,
Yeah, that's true.
I hope not. Trey's awesome.
Sandy's awesome. I read Clown. I was proud of that.
Yeah, you wrecked me, dude. Facts and
I'm
logic.
gonna have to watch these hours and hours people are streaming on my channel when I don't have time to actually listen.
All right. Do we want to move to chapter 8 just because we spent an hour on the first one?
Yep.
Maybe we'll finish the other 2 chapters.
Yeah, we should probably at least look at them.
I didn't do the reading at all, so don't look at me.
Yeah,
I don't
you
know
were too
if I
busy
had-
streaming all day, Jacob.
I actually kind of sort of was hoping I would have time to read today, but I only had an hour, and it was like, okay, it's Rabiol's yard site. I'm not going to catch up in an hour on all the reading. So.
Oh my god.
I found it interesting. I don't have any notes on this. This is really, I'm just throwing it to the group, but there was something, and I tagged page 149. But there was something about he was making some kind of argument about kind of like talking about moral actions and laws or legal laws. I don't know how to put it, but something about how those are conflated, or maybe more in a modern sense, they're more conflated because there's a focus about what does he say? Like an other directed society.
Yeah, I have a little X there, but I didn't come back and give it the long study.
Did anybody find that like has any thoughts about this?
In the
Go
middle
Trey.
of
Trey has lots of thoughts.
Yeah, it seemed like it. I wasn't sure what's going on.
I don't want to interrupt Sam because she's smarter than me.
I was just going to confess that in the middle of a bad moment at work, I actually yelled at the store manager that legal did nothing for me ever in life. And I was about to finish off with, you really only find your own justice, and that's by how you choose to act. So I did put an X beside here. We tend to think that if it's legal, it is moral. That's a horrible thing. If you're allowed to do it, it must be right, right?
No, I don't think that's true. I really don't think that's true. I think partially of it is true, but I just don't think that what we've seen in America recently, especially with like a lot of BLM stuff, is an example of we believing the law just because it's in the law is correct. We see an idea of against it. Because it is in the law, it's wrong. Or the idea of the law is wrong. That's what I'm
Would you like to tease that out a bit more, Trey?
Sure. Like, I don't think, okay. When we see the cops or we see the idea of law, we believe it's corrupt, therefore it is not true. And I would say that if you ask young people, like if a cop pulls somebody over, is there ever a chance that the cop would be right? They're going to probably say that's not true. Now, is that like a correct statement about society? No, but it's because they have an underlying system of morality that's pushing against it. And the underlying system of morality is a little bit Marxist, that the people on the bottom should always be protected, and should always be looked after, and the people at the top are oppressors, pretty much.
Hermeneutic of suspicion,
Yeah.
and the system is corrupt, and all of the things from the 60s that helped destroy our society.
Yeah.
So I have a question for you and Jacob, then, Trey. When I was going through my divorce, one of the things I talked about with my lawyer was the fact that I said, in many ways, the law is designed to protect the law. It has to maintain its integrity to function. So therefore, that's kind of its primary how we use it. I don't know that that's true necessarily, but it really felt like it was true given some of the process at the time. So how would you see that in terms of what you were both just saying about?
Well, any system will protect itself, just like any human being will defend itself. Defend them and should defend themselves. The question is, are they doing the right thing, right? So if the legal system is just, right, then it should defend itself. If it's corrupt, then it should recognize itself as corrupt and not defend itself. But you can't assume, like, the fact that it's defending itself is not proof that it's wrong.
Yeah. I think you're right, Sandy, for a period that people believe what was in the law was correct. But I think that over time, I think it was first with like the idea of like the crack epidemic and everything like that, as well as at least the idea of like, as we started learning about how the government sort of institutes laws, basically hurts the underclass pretty much with over policing. And okay, I'll give more recent examples that you agree with. I think Me Too was an example of where the law failed, as well as we could say with some instances of police violence. Because we started seeing, hey, the law should be taking care of these guys, but it doesn't. It protects them, just like 08 as well.
So, okay, what I will say is we are now seeing more corruption than we did before. But when you study history and you know about the corruption that existed, you realize that while people at the time were not aware of all of the corruption that existed, we actually have less corruption now than we did before. We just were not aware of it or able to see it.
I mean, that's partially true, right? But like, we had Watergate, and he got in trouble.
Exactly, which is the opposite of corruption. The president used to not get in trouble with anything like that.
But I feel like you're thinking, oh, like in 0 BC, it was super corrupt, and now it's not.
No, I'm thinking 100 years ago. Have you heard of Teapot Dome?
I've never heard of Teapot Dome.
Exactly. Yeah. This is our frame is historically inaccurate.
But don't you think there's a difference between how we handled the Clinton scandal and how we're handling Trump scandals?
Yes, we're actually pursuing Trump for a bunch of things, whereas we let Clinton go off, do whatever he wanted when he should have been impeached.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I feel like we're treating Trump a lot more aggressively.
No,
Definitely.
Hold up. There's a difference between what the public sees, and I would say what I think that
Everything you see is what the public sees.
Okay, hold on.
Wrecked.
I
Right
think
out,
that
right there.
Trump got support, and like there wasn't as much of. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it seemed like a lot of the tabloids focused on the Clintons, and it was a whole scandal, news cycle, and everything like that. No,
Yeah, no, that's not what it is.
no.
In fact, so you've never heard of the Drudge Report? I'm sorry, like we're
Okay,
going
I'm
way off.
Of course.
We're going way off the thing. But yeah, your history, you've been engrossed in woke history. So like,
He listens to Destiny all day. Like, what do you expect? Come on.
It's okay, Trey. I'm kind of in the woke history thing.
I'm sorry you don't know many facts.
I don't know. I watched.
Yeah, and all of those documentaries were bullshit. I lived through the Clinton impeachment. I remember that. It was very, very important in my life at the time. Yeah. So, okay, back to the Great Partnership. Elijah hates this even more than he hates us talking about Christianity.
Well,
We already did that. I brought up
at
coming.
least, if you're gonna talk about Christianity, at least do it interestingly or something like that. My God. But I mean, like Halakhic Man was so good. This, I don't know.
I didn't pick it.
Yeah, it was the people who picked it. Disgusting.
It was Yosef and Chazi who were like, "This is really, really good." And
Another reason why. I
And
hate
now they're not
democracy.
here.
They're probably sitting back with popcorn enjoying.
This was their plan all along.
That was the point.
Wow.
I mean, I don't know.
Just wanted to
I'm
mention
enjoying this, honestly. I don't know. Maybe I'm just more basic,
Yeah, I like it as well.
but I'm enjoying just parts of it. I mean, honestly, it's just interesting. I'm not. It's like I can agree maybe that it doesn't lacks some of the depth in some of the arguments, but I feel like he's picking and choosing where to spend time, and he has a lot of things that he's covering. So
He does.
Okay, was anyone convinced by his argument in chapter 8?
yes,
No,
You were convinced.
no, I don't know. I didn't let it sit.
Oh my God, man.
I have a favorite line so far, but I'll wait till you see it.
What were you saying, Elijah? Sorry.
I just didn't know. I wasn't convinced by his. He ended the chapter. What was it? So Dostoevsky was wrong and Tolstoy was right. Morality does not suddenly break down when people stop believing. People do not conclude God does not exist, therefore everything is permitted. And I can see, I mean, some of that I believe, but I still wasn't convinced that he was correct that Dostoevsky was wrong.
I think he's using Dostoevsky rhetorically and a little unfairly. But I think his point overall is right. It just wasn't necessarily new or that exciting to me.
I mean, like, what do you think Dostoevsky's position was then?
Well, he's saying that Dostoevsky's position was that, like, as soon as people don't believe in God anymore, they give up on all morality.
Right.
And so he set Dostoevsky up as that example, and then Tolstoy in the opposite corner. I haven't like read that part of Dostoevsky. I'm not convinced that that's what he was saying, though.
I mean, but I do think that
Just based on what I have read of him.
I think some atheist thinkers like Sartre and Nietzsche say, right, that like if God doesn't exist, then there are no morals.
That doesn't mean that your everyday person is going to think that way, though.
Well, I mean,
But I mean, I think that's why he's saying about Tolstoy, where you work on the fumes of whatever you were running on before, and then when you realize that you need to start generating your own morals because life throws at you new situations, then you start generating new ideas for how to live, and it's going to be each individual going to generate their own things, and the ideals for those are going to be very different.
Yeah.
So he's right.
And then everything just kind of gradually falls apart. And unfortunately, it seems to last exactly long enough for us to completely forget as a society how things were supposed to work.
Okay, so I have a random question. It isn't a very fair question. If that's true, is that because it's hopeless and things are really that bad, or is that because God takes pity on us and gives us time to start fresh?
well, I also found his argument to say that like, oh, we observe in people like empathy, therefore morals exist, or something like that. That seemed to me to be very poor argument.
It seemed to you what?
A poor argument.
A flawed argument?
Yeah, it's bad.
Because how do you derive? You see that, like, why would you derive that for people?
Well, yeah, of course. Okay, so you observe some fact in humans that we act in a particular way in response to, some environment. Okay, we do that in other situations. Like, have you ever been so angry that you wanted to play baseball with someone's face? Like, that's a feeling you have, right? So I just don't know how, okay, how do we decide?
So,
I think some of it is about looking on like a society or community level rather than on an individual level.
Okay, so I had a really bad day at work today, and I am very ashamed of myself because I don't generally blow up at people, and I did. And yes, it comes with a cumulative thing. And I wrote myself this long note as to what the different elements were that went from a couple of days ago I was fine to today I yelled at people. And a lot of it goes into what you just kind of said, because it's like on a good day I check myself and I look for the greater good of the entire team at work. And every once in a while, they all irritate me enough and then kind of hand over, I don't know, or at least I feel like they hand over the responsibility for dealing with all the negative stuff so that everybody kind of offloads on me and then eventually I'm going, it's too much, but morality, like if I'm completely moral person, without God, I wouldn't be feeling remorse right now. I would have behaved how I think I should have behaved to begin with. And or I wouldn't care because I would think that it was completely justifiable how I behaved. And the truth is that part of it was justifiable and part of it was absolutely the reverse. and that's, or whatever the heck we're talking about, between religion being the key to morality and morality just existing. I prefer existing within the realm of God because, I can, I go and I vent on God, and, and I say I'm sorry, and it makes a whole lot more sense to me doing that there than trying to vent on the managers who had no clue what I was talking about. And I don't know if that actually quite answers what you just said, but you were touching on those places.
Elijah, I don't think that
Because I'm a frozen.
I don't think that Rabbi Sachs is necessarily disagreeing with you, right? I mean, like he says that argument, but he also says that this argument fizzles out. This is why you need religion, because it doesn't really tell you. It doesn't give you enough.
So I also think what he's saying, at least from a philosophical standpoint, there is an argument for morality, which I think sticks, is that we have an intuition of the outside world, just like we have an intuition of moral sense. So we have an intuition that something's wrong. So if we want to believe that that our moral senses aren't pointing to something true, we would also have to reject that our outward sense of the world is not true.
I have an absolutely horrible question because we're not supposed to talk about certain topics, but your perspective of religion within what you just described has to matter, because when I think about, if I'm taking my cue from my religion for how I manage the morals I instinctively feel, then how well the religion itself does that and points to God is super important. And that's about as close to saying anything on religion as I'm going to get.
Well, I guess my question in response to Trey is, okay, so we have particular feelings, and they're given to us by evolution.
That doesn't need to be true, but yeah.
Okay, but due to some natural process, right? And so the thing that I use to discern between my feelings is also given to me by natural processes, right? So how do I make a distinction between two different feelings using the thing that also comes about naturally, right? So should I accept my moral feelings and also the thing that, like, I don't know how to describe it really, but it's like the problem to me seems I don't have anything else other than my natural faculties to distinguish between everything. So I just don't know, see how I can make a claim,
Yeah, that's like the point of the argument, is that like you could question your moral senses, but also our understanding of the world is also adapted from evolution. The reason we have eyes is because of evolutionary processes. So like if you question your moral sense, you would also have to be questioning your understanding of the outside world, and then you just be a solipsist.
Okay. So how does that give me to morality then?
Well, but it would say that would be a true sense, because you would act as though the outside world exists. And if you don't act as though the outside world exists, then like what are you doing? You're not even in the game. Like it feels as soon as we reduce everything to solipsism, like the game is over. Like your rationality doesn't work. Okay. I forgot. There's an argument basically saying there's an argument talking about you can argue something into the absurd to prove it to be true. I don't know what it's called.
Yeah, proof by contradiction or something like that. I guess the only problem is that I think Jonathan Haidt mentions this in one of his books. Maybe it's The Righteous Mind, but he mentions how, for example, in India somewhere, like women eating meat or something, or fish after they become widowed is like considered some great moral problem.
Yeah.
So I just don't know how to. So I mean, but I wouldn't consider that to be immoral.
Yes, and
And
sometimes
so
we have
then again,
people-
how do I distinguish between my moral feelings that you see across the world, right? And again, like you have things, Tom Holland talks about this, how like the Romans viewed their family, and also I think Rabbi Sachs talks about this in the last chapter we read, just as their family as they can do anything to it, right? We may view that as immoral now, but they didn't. So I just don't see any basis for it.
I think it's called cognitive ethics. I'm just trying to say that I don't think Rabbi Sachs' point is without basis. And yeah, those things can be true, but again, like people have hallucinations. You could say the same thing. Like sometimes we've also had bad understandings of the world or of our outside world. Like you could say the same thing. And we used to trust people who like would hallucinate, would do all these things. Just like we may have some people who like believe that eating fish is wrong.
And then why trust my insights now?
Yeah. Yeah. Like. Are you asking me as a genuine question or as?
Yeah, like why trust my insights now then? If everyone can have a different moral opinion and it truly be felt, but it can also change over time, why should I ever believe that morals exist?
Because you can't live that way. Like you don't believe that. You don't believe that. You don't believe that morals don't exist. That isn't a thing. You get punched, you're gonna say that.
I can't.
Yeah, like
many people have thought. David Hume wrote
but
an
he didn't live
argument
that
against morals. Bertrand Russell didn't believe in morals. Sartre didn't believe in
I'm kind of
morals.
lost
Nietzsche
in
didn't believe
what
in
you're
morals.
arguing about. Like, I don't know what your perspectives are here, so I don't know what you're necessarily advocating for. I'm a little lost.
I'm not trying to make a full defense, I think, of cognitive ethics, but basically, Rabbi Sachs said that we have an intuition of empathy, and that points to something. And Elijah said, no, that doesn't make any sense. And I said, well, actually, there's a philosophical argument that works pretty well, where pretty much if you doubt your ethical sense that come from your mind, you should also doubt your understanding of the world.
Yeah. I think the way that I read what Sachs was saying, was Rabbi Sachs was saying is I don't know if I read it as an intuition of empathy, but it's just like we act empathetical, but we can also act ruthlessly, and we can derive insights from both of those things and act in the world. So the question is like, how do you choose what behaviors to actually emphasize, when, with who? And that is the narrative maybe that we can weave into this. So the fact that you can perceive things in the world doesn't really tell you anything. This is the ultimate freedom, right? Okay, I can perceive anything in the world, but what do I choose to do?
I don't think it's a perfect basis. Like I would say that religion is moral eyeglasses, right? Like it's not. It's giving you more clear distinction of what you should pursue. Like it shouldn't be taken as either utilitarian or Kantian. It should be taken as like virtue. Like you should try to do this.
So I'm listening to all this, and I'm kind of hovering on 154, 155, where he's talking about Darwin and the free rider problem.
Oh yeah, I had a point about this.
Go for it.
So I also had the same question. But Robert Sapolsky, I don't know if you heard him. He's a evolutionary biologist. If you look into game theory and basically how the best to play like board games, they applied it to humans, and they were able to basically override this problem. Because basically, to play the game of life, it's better to be cooperative, and the people who actually are selfish will not benefit. I'm not knowledgeable on game theory, but I'm just saying if you want to look it up, it finds the answer.
Tit for tat, or yeah.
If you want to explain that, Ben.
I don't know how to explain it. Elijah can explain. No, I'm kidding, but I'm not good at explaining things. Um,
So at the top of 154, he goes over what Darwin came to. It said it began with a paradox Darwin noticed at the heart of his system. Evolution is the struggle to survive. If life is competition for scarce resources, if the strong win and the weak die, then everywhere ruthlessness should prevail. But it does not. All societies value altruism. People esteem those who make sacrifices for the sake of others. This, in Darwinian terms, does not seem to make sense at all, and he was honest enough to admit it. And I had some X's and stuff there, and I'm like, yeah, because.
So I have the quote, or I'm looking it up right now. So, if the entire population plays tit for tat and a mutant arises who always defects, so this is the free rider, tit for tat will outperform always defect. The population of the mutant becomes too large, then percentage of the mutant will be kept small. Tit for tat is therefore ESS with respect to only these two strategies. Basically saying that this mutant, this person, the free rider, if I remember his lecture, will be found out. Like, if you're riding the bus for free, you will be defected, right? And I think they said that you will be stamped out more. Mutants will be more likely to be stamped out. So a freaking example is like, we can even think way back, right? If you stole, right, you had your arm cut off, right? And we can imagine before that, maybe there was a smaller punitive addition, but over time, tit for tat was so beneficial, like cooperative idea, that the punishments for becoming a defector were larger and larger.
I feel like in some ways when I brought up earlier some of the messiness of discussions around church denominations, all the stuff where everybody's starting to call each other woke because we're standing on different sides of how do you handle a problem like this, which basically I think this is the center of that whole problem is we're going to take either the sew off with their arm and eventually off with their head, kind of thing, as opposed to, oh no, you have to completely and utterly and always agree to protect the weakest, and so you're balancing out the weak and the strong, but we haven't seemed to agree on how to do it.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
See, I told you I probably fall in the woke category a bit. Can you be a conservative woke person? I don't know. I don't like those definitions.
So, Trey, what were you saying is what you're trying to point out is that this is something that we can observe through game theory and not necessarily just through the narrative of whatever revelation we had.
Yeah. From what I understand is working together. If I remember the lecture, being a defect does have high gain, but it has high risk. And because it has such high risk, statistically, you're going to lose, just like we imagine casinos, right? So taking less risky options is always going to be beneficial in the long run. That's why cooperation is advantageous, because it is less risky. And that's also why free riders lose at the end of the day, because they're taking a risky position, which does have benefit, but it is risky. And because it's risky, they will eventually lose.
Okay, I've got one more question. I've made it. This is the chapter I was avoiding. So I've made it as far as 156. And I'm looking at what Trey and I were just talking about. What I saw says there's 3 ways of getting around, 3 ways of getting individuals to act in a way that's beneficial for the group. And this is where I'm kind of going, okay, my instinct said this is related to the whole current meaning crisis and how we divvy up on sides. So he's got 2 points on the one side and 1 point on the other. It says the first way we can get them to act in a way that is beneficial to the group is power. We can force them to. And I'm seeing that in a lot of advocacy things in some respects. But I'm seeing it really hard in the church situation I was describing, where it's kind of bringing the hammer down. This is just how it is. And you either, you either comply or leave. Okay. So that's when there's different uses of power. Okay. So he says the second way is wealth. We pay them to act in the way that's beneficial to the group. The disadvantage of those two, power and wealth, is that they leave selfishness untouched. Okay. They use external, and it was making me think because Trey was talking about the internal and external things. So they leave they use external incentives. The danger is strong individuals will outwit the system. They will use power or wealth to their own advantage. The third alternative is to educate them to see that the welfare of others matters as much as their own. No system has done this more effectively than religion, for an obvious reason. Religion teaches us that we are a part of the whole, a thread in the fabric of God's creation, a note in the symphony of life. Faith is the ability to see ourselves joined to others by God's love. So where my conundrum and question arises is, I tend to agree with them, but sadly what I'm seeing from that is that I'm watching, at least in the Christian context, and I don't know how it plays out in other faith traditions, but you got all this lining up of we are progressive, we're conservative. The people that are trying to educate people are all woke, and therefore they're screwing with the proper functioning of the system that is currently working very well. If you just, stop all this trying to explain why we're supposed to notice things that we aren't noticing and what we're supposed to do with them. So we're obviously really screwing up somehow, because if these three things are true, and I tend to lean towards seeing more sense on the Jewish side of some of the discussion so far. And if Rabbi Sachs is saying that education's supposed to be the one that theoretically works, what the heck are we doing wrong?
I don't think there is. I don't know what Sachs is trying to say, but I don't think there is one right way. Like sometimes you need to use power. Sometimes financial incentives is necessary. Maybe not necessary, but could be helpful. And sometimes education. That's kind of like teaching people how to fish, right? Instead of giving them fish or whatever else. So it's kind of like more of being able to supply them with the way that they can do something themselves. So there's like not necessarily one. I don't know if it's like about black and white in terms of like this is what we should do, or it's more about kind of like we need to find out what's relevant for the situation that we're doing. And I think the education part of it, I think this is what Trey is talking about, where he's saying, here's what game theory tells us, or this is what Sapolsky says. Really, this is what Sapolsky says. Here's what game theory is telling us, and this is why we should act this way, right? Because look, you'll get the best outcomes if this is how you operate. But the dirtiness of it and the messiness of it is that people don't necessarily. It's not enough for some people. Like it doesn't. It doesn't. It's not enough for some people, and I mean, I can have some arguments, with that whole theory, because it doesn't necessarily, let's say, account for history, right? So, I mean, if you're two individuals, let's say, if you're an Israeli and a Palestinian, you're going to have history before you that is going to taint the way you're going to make decisions, the actions in your relations. So, but I think the basic thing is that these are two narratives or right, they're poses to narratives that are set to educate us on how to behave. And I think Sachs is basically pointing out the fact that religion has been doing that better than other systems.
I'm not saying religion is the system. I'm saying that he posed the question, why do we have free riders? And I'm saying that the reason we have why don't we have a bunch of free riders? And the answer to that is game theory. I'm not pointing at the individual. I'm pointing at the society for an answer to that. And I would say we have seen an increase in tit for tat. Again, the reason we don't have a war between America and Russia directly is because of nuclear war, right? We can't respond with enough force, right? And we've seen that over time, right? Like even if all the problems with World War I, the idea of more alliances are good for us, right? Like this idea that, like, for example, when Germany fell, everyone else fell because they were all intertangled. Germany was the massive producer of everything on the map, right? So I would say, like, yes, history does play a part, but what we've seen over time is more alliances, not less.
So do we just feel like we're really screwing it up, but we're actually doing better? Like, because because we are creating more alliances, we are seeing greater good. We just feel like we aren't because, I don't know, stuff's in our face every day or something.
I mean, I think both are true, but I think what we have to do now is smaller skirmishes, which I think causes more blood, in a sense. We're not, America and Russia aren't fighting, but we have two proxy wars going on in, let's say, the Southern Africa, right? Because those have like territories that are advantageous to us or something like that. We have more pawns that are losing rather than kings.
Were you nodding, Elijah?
What?
Were you nodding?
No, I wasn't nodding.
Okay.
I was just looking straight ahead.
So I will say that I don't think tit for tat works for like nations, but it doesn't work for the individual. I think that you can definitely agree that individuals are changing. I think that we only look in society only for consent. Consent is our highest goal, and I think that we really only care about, I don't know the more normal term, but like Kantian ethics, that like there's only really bad things or there's only really good things, and that's all morality is. Like the idea of having virtues of things you should strive for, I don't think that exists in our current day. If it's permissible, it's fine as long as it doesn't violate people's consent. I don't know what you guys think about that, and I think that's also what he's trying to describe. I don't know. Another point that kind of messed me up is when he talked about abortion. When I think most abortions would be fine under Jewish law because I'm not too sure on that, but I think most abortions are under like 40 days. I could be wrong on that, but that's what I understand.
Jacob might be the best person to say.
I don't think most abortions in the United States are under 40 days.
Aren't they under the first trimester?
That's not the first 40 days.
Oh yeah, you're right.
40 days is like 1 month. Like, and even, I mean, so people, yeah, like it's not like Jewish law. Like most people use Jewish law as like some sort of 9 out of 10 abortions done before 12 weeks.
Right.
12 weeks is 80 days.
Actually, I want to look at a graph.
It's interesting. 12 weeks. 12 weeks is when they tell you you're allowed to go and tell your family, because it's fairly certain that if you hit 12 weeks, there's probably viability. And most miscarriages, which are spontaneous abortions, will happen in 12 weeks or less.
Yeah, so I don't know if I don't know what. Sorry, Emma, were you going to say
Oh,
something?
no, I don't think so.
Okay.
Thanks.
I don't know if I don't know exactly what you were saying that you had the issue with Rabbi Sachs there, but I think what he was saying there is that he was more talking about the general. You can call it in simple terms the vibe shift that people have, right? With abortions, with in a society where abortions and euthanasia, is that what he was saying? Where that's something that is becoming more and more prevalent or just easily accessible. That's a sign for something that you can think about it as like choosing life versus choosing death, where that kind of lines become where that becomes a little tricky, or a sign of a society moving in the wrong direction.
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with that, but I think it's just a bit disingenuous. So I looked it up, and it says 43% of abortions occur within 6 weeks, which is a high number, right? And I feel as though like
Disingenuous in what way?
because it's like if you ask a religious person, okay, the modern idea of if you ask somebody about abortion, if they're religious, they say never. That's usually the idea. But I think in Jewish law, that's different. And there's, in my mind, it's sort of, seems like he's defending the Christian idea of that there should be no abortions at all. And for example, the Supreme Court's decision to like, I don't know, I don't really care.
The Supreme Court did not
Return
make
abortion decision to the states?
You know what I mean. I know, like how abortion changed. I'm not a woman, so I don't really care. So, like, it seems that Rabbi Sachs is sort of like allowing for that point of view rather than the Jewish view, which is fine. But I feel like he should state the Jewish view since he is coming from an Abrahamic perspective.
Yeah, I don't think it's. Again, this is my understanding, but I don't think that it's different from what he's saying, because the ideal is to have a baby. So this is the thing to emphasize. The ideal is not to let's see how we can optimize for more that abortions are easier. That's not an ideal. Like if it's necessary, then obviously this is something that you should do. But the ideal is to focus on how do we get more babies. So that's kind of what he's pointing to.
Right, but he also says babies in stable homes, which I think is an important point. I just feel like there is an important point to talk about abortion, but it's like I think there's an idea that women are just like, you know what? I just don't really want a baby right now. I'm just gonna kill it, and it doesn't even matter in my mind. When I don't really think that's true.
There's way too much of that. That's the problem.
How do you know that?
Because there are people who have
talk
like,
about it.
yeah, I mean,
about having done it.
I was driving, and there was a abortion rights thing, and this woman was wearing a shirt, proudly had 2.5 abortions or something like that.
Right.
And it's like, you have a T-shirt celebrating your abortions.
But I need statistics on that, because that's like
No. It's but that's what they were defending. I'm not saying statistics. I'm saying the fact that anybody like.
Okay, you know what? I have friends that don't have abortions. That's the difference.
Yeah.
Okay, I have religious friends. So get out of my head, Elijah. Okay.
The fact that anybody would think abortion is a good thing is a lack of morality.
But like that's like me looking at like, for for example, the Westboro Baptist Church and saying, "Oh, that's an example because I see people who have signs that saying like gay people should die."
Yeah,
right?
Anybody who says that is an immoral person. What's the problem here?
Right, but what I'm trying to talk about is conflation. And that's why I say I need to see a statistics because, of course, loud people are always going to go to our attention. But I'd be very surprised if you know what, I'll change my mind. If there's a statistic that says that most abortions are done out of just want.
As far as what I know, like most abortions are people using it as birth control.
I'm trying to find out where it actually says that, and I'm never sure how to actually ask it because I don't know that it's actually necessarily asked, except of people who maybe went to a clinic to talk about things. Whereas I've had one DNC abortion and one straight up DNC, which would have been listed as DNC abortion, possibly, or listed as something else, except for the fact of how the pregnancy terminated.
What is DNC?
Dilation and curettage, where they have to go in and make sure everything's cleaned out properly. So one of the things I wish is that in the course of all the yelling that we tend to do when we put ourselves like on the extremes of things, we use language that, like, we say you have a miscarriage. No, you don't. You either have a spontaneous abortion in terms of how it will get listed if you go for medical care. I have had very definitely one spontaneous abortion, one possible spontaneous abortion with a DNC, and one DNC abortion because I did not pass the baby. And that's how it doesn't get talked about because of the ways that people do talk about things. And I wish that people could allow for actual discussion around some of the, it's kind of like if we go into the religious context and everybody says all Judaism is this or all Judaism is that.
But Sandy, no.
Break down. But the thing is that there's reasons why things are defined, and there's reasons why people think that Judaism's okay with abortion, because God goes, okay, like if somebody comes along and is fighting with my husband and I get plowed in the gut and I lose the child, does that person get committed for murder? In these days, possibly, except for the fact that most places would blame the woman. My sister and I talked about it when I was pregnant with Joshua. 6 months along, I have no idea why I wasn't wearing my glasses going downstairs, but I was carrying Jacob, who's two years old. He was about 2.5 by the time Joshua was born. And I missed a complete step on the stairs. And at that time, Texas was talking about if a woman, like you could intentionally throw yourself down the stairs and land on your belly to force an abortion because you aren't allowed to have one. Therefore, you can, what's the word that Trey's been using, like where you've got that person in game theory where, you can kind of find a workaround. And so there's an awful lot of discussion around ways that people, there's a lot of how we judge other people based on life experience, and our history that's behind us and the things that we value. And those are all really important things, our history and the things we value. But sometimes, what did he say, conflate? Sometimes they conflate the truth. Sometimes they throw something in between what is and what we assume to be. And there's a lot of that going on right now.
Sandy, you seem to be using the word abortion very differently than how most people use it.
But that's my point, because people have taken the word abortion, which was a medical term, and they have turned it into the opposite of a natural miscarriage, which is the, like me saying, like I get up and I have a Tim's every day instead of saying I get up and have a cup of coffee. It's coffee. It's not Tim's. It's coffee. It's not
Sandy. But you're conflating things. When we talk about abortions, we're talking about people who voluntarily want to end their pregnancy. We're not talking about somebody who happened to fall or whatever. That's not what we talk. What people mean
That's
when
my
they talk
point.
about abortion.
And that's my point. Had I lived in Texas at the time when this event happened and that they were pushing through for this law, if any neighbor or anybody questioned it, I could end up in court and my sister.
No, that's bullshit. No, that's bullshit.
Prove it.
That's not true.
How?
What do you mean how? You're saying when they were contemplating the law, it was possible that somebody could. Like
my sister and I had a real talk about it.
Andy. I'm sorry.
I only looked it up because she did all the Right to Life walks and she wanted my opinion, having a
right.
child with disability.
And so these stories are told about things that are like, I'm sorry, like
so
we have a public discussion where
right. So what are we supposed to be doing?
Talking about things which are just pure false.
So what are we supposed to call voluntarily ending a pregnancy?
Voluntarily ending a pregnancy would be nice.
It's a little cumbersome, but
I know.
And it makes it sound a lot nicer than abortion, which actually sounds pretty horrible, which is why people use it.
Oh, and honestly,
I don't know if it,
Emma, it wouldn't fit anyway
no.
because sometimes people who would voluntarily end a pregnancy can't also because of the same reasons. Like my cousin's good friend who had a pregnancy she had to carry to term where the child was born with no skull and died on birth because it was basically dead from the time they realized that that was the case. But they weren't allowed to, because of when they found out, end the pregnancy because the doctor said no. The best way to handle this is you have to carry it to the full 9 months and you have to go through the pregnancy and you have to realize the baby is dead, you know? And I thought knowing that was harder than my friend who just lost one because it was stillborn and she assumed it was going to be alive, you know? And this poor girl, I mean, Jacob will say it's a one-off story, and it is, except that she lost both her parents at 16, moved in with my cousin and her family, lost her first husband to a fluke throat thing when her first two kids were little. Or, no, she had 4 with him. But she lost her husband. Then she lost her, not her oldest, but her second one to cancer. Then she had...
Sandy, what does that have to do with anything we're talking about?
People can't talk about stuff like this because we're not supposed to talk about it because it doesn't fit a category.
No, it's not a matter of not talking about it because it doesn't fit. What you're mentioning, a lot of things. I'm very sorry she had a difficult life, but that has no bearing on whether or not abortion should be legal.
Right. And then how do we talk about it?
Well,
I'm not sure church groups have bearing on that either.
I wonder this because I've sat in church groups where the ladies in the ladies group that I was in said they should have a right to view every single person's medical history who they suspect of having an abortion. So I stood up and said, okay, you want to have a look at mine? I've had a D&C abortion. What does that tell you about me? Nothing. Absolutely nothing.
And I think, and I'd like to move these together, is I think this ties, again, what it means by freedom. And I think that's what I was trying to say with the 40-day thing, at the very least, is if we have Christians ruling, depending on who, right? No offense to anybody, but, we'll have no abortions. But if we have Jewish people ruling, we'd have 40-day abortions, right? And I think that that does talk about the sort of push and pull in these ideas. And I think Sandy's right. Like, if you were a witness and you were a nurse and you found out another witness had an abortion, you would have to violate HIPAA, like that, or you were told to violate HIPAA, pretty much.
Right, or like.
Well, I'm in charge and I'm a bit sleepy, so I'm gonna just do. You guys can keep on talking, but I just want to for the regular stuff. We're gonna read chapter 10, Meaningful Life, and chapter 11, Darwin. in 2 weeks' time. So that will be, I think, the 7th of August.
I think so.
The 7th of August.
How much is left of the book?
We have some.
Like
Is it?
We're
4
skipping the
chapters and a half
chapter on
long?
marriage, so it should be okay.
there are 5 chapters left, including the ones we're reading, and then the epilogue.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's going to be next week, the week after, and then we're going to be done with the book.
Yeah, and so this week I will start a new poll for the new book, and we can just put your suggestions in. I'll call out for that, and then I'll do more polls
So-
and we can choose the next
And
one.
the question, Elijah, because sometimes, like, some of the stuff that was put out, I mean, I see the title of it, but I don't really know what it is. Are we going to have a little discussion in the book club thing? Like, do we want to study something more about? What were some of those things Jacob recommended? Like, or like we're doing, like, I'm enjoying listening to some of the online stuff. Are we keeping those studies separate for, people just working through them individually, or like Ben is doing with Hezi? Are we keeping those things separate, or are we putting stuff like that in the mix, or what kind
The
of
book
stuff?
club can read any book.
I found a reading list of nonfiction books from Rabbi Wine, and I posted it on the Discord. I think any of those books would be a good idea because I trust Rabbi Wine explicitly.
Very lovely.
Yep, for sure.
No, that's fine.
So, all right, that's it from me, guys. But don't let me leaving ruin your discussion.
Sorry.
Have a good one.
Han's out.
Well,
Did he share anything tonight? Yeah.
A little bit.
Yeah.
if we're going to discuss things that aren't about the book, well, honestly,
It was about the book, but yeah. Because it did.
And at least start there.
Yeah.
Did you get to the last chapter then?
Does anybody want it?
Did we not get to the last chapter?
We're on chapter 8.
No.
Poor Elijah.
The last chapter is chapter 9 on relationships. That's why I said we're skipping marriage.
We like you, Elijah.
Finally, we get to the good chapter. Chapter 9 was my favorite out of this.
I didn't really have any notes on it, I don't think. I just understood everything very clearly, so everything was super clear to me.
As I was going to say, is Ben has nothing to say. He has a stellar life, a wonderful wife, a great marriage, and he's like, yeah, so what's your point?
When are you moving to Austin, by the way?
What?
When are you moving?
Very soon. Here, see it. There's a box here.
I don't see the box.
There's one box. So there was one box. There'll be more.
And Chezi's here, so you can complain to him for his bad choice of books.
Honestly, I also chose this.
Same.
I like Rabbi Sachs. What can I say? And I never read a book of his though, so I thought this would be a good opportunity to do that.
I don't know. I like Rabbi Sachs, and he did a lot of good work. But yeah, I don't know if I'm going to actually finish this book because he just seems. I do think he's very apologetic and he's very kumbaya, and I'm
Really?
tired of kumbaya.
You didn't think he was kumbaya? Like, isn't that Rabbi Sachs like the most kumbaya Orthodox rabbi ever?
No, sometimes he wasn't he's very kumbaya, but he I mean, you. What did Elijah say? He complimented Christians like if you walked into a Baptist church and you said very nice building. It's like those types of comments.
Mm-hmm.
And Emma loves Baptist church buildings.
I have been in one. It was actually a really nice one. It was really old though. That's probably why it was nice. I don't know.
Did you
Rabbi
go to
Sachs
Thunder
is
Bay?
right. It was a nice building.
Emma, you didn't go to Thunder Bay, did you?
No.
Apparently, that was the Abbey was a Baptist church before.
Oh.
Yeah, which was surprising to me.
Before Hillsdale built their new concert hall disguised as a chapel, they used the Baptist church as a concert hall for things that were too big to fit in their actual concert hall. And that's the one time I remember being in a Baptist church.
So somehow we again moved away from talking about the last chapter.
I'm looking at Trey to see
And I'm
why
also
we love
running out of gas. But I don't know if anybody has any cool thoughts about it.
I liked this chapter a lot. I don't know if I have anything like super concrete to say about it. I did like the talk about his sort of long multi-page discussion about people as individuals, or like marriage being about individuals, not just about like the species, and that's what differentiates us from animals.
Marriage is about individuals? You said that? What? I didn't know what marriage is about.
Explain, Emma. Explain.
He talks about how Adam and Eve both received their proper names. Like towards the end.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And he draws a connection between that and like human marriage is on a level like above, animal mating because of our self-consciousness. And because that's what leads to like love in a unique way.
I think a better reframing is sex is for the individual, marriage is for the community. I think that's also what he's contrasting, is the idea that highly individualized, you only have really just like continuous, just pointless sexual relationships, or you never get married at all, which is what we're saying.
That's bizarre. I don't think sex is for the
I don't
individual.
think that's what he's saying.
Why would you think that?
Yeah, Trey, you're wrong about everything.
I am wrong about everything.
He's been right.
No, he was right about something. I forgot what it was.
The definition of freedom.
What has Trey ever been right about?
Well, I really liked his jacket in the conference, so I'll give him that.
He is a snazzy dresser. I'll give him that.
Thank you.
Not as snazzy as Chezi is.
No, I'll never reach that.
I also like what he compared marriage to the unified theory in physics, or something like that. I think that
The thing that makes everything else make sense.
Right, because it's putting all these, we call it weird, like all these rituals, all these behaviors in the right context that actually makes them holy. And again, I think that's kind of like that is the theme that he's talking about in terms of a narrative. Like a marriage is a covenant. It's this narrative that you can put where you can put all these different behaviors that point in a certain direction. So I just like
there is
that.
no unifying theory of physics, though, right?
What?
There's no unifying theory of physics, though.
There's no grand unifying theory.
Yeah, I mean that's
It's both that works for both classical and modern physics.
Right. I watched Oppenheimer. I know. But like I don't know. That's kind of petty.
Chezi wants us to read Holiness and Nature on the Roots of Life. And he says he'll buy each of us a copy of the book.
Wow.
Nature and the Roots of Life.
Which should tell you that Chezi is either the author of that book or really rich.
Or both. How do you know the book didn't do well and therefore he can afford to hand it out?
Oh, he must have bought like 100 of them. And
What's it about?
I'm guessing life and holiness and nature.
and roots.
There's a possibility you're both right.
Okay, I want to be right again. How is sex not for the individual? I mean, at least how I've understood it through history is that like you can critique it, but isn't there some truth that like sex is about power even when it's not? Like the idea, or at least I'll say it. At least for men, sex is for the individual. But of course, women can enjoy sex too.
Are you sure about that?
I don't know. I'm just trying to be a feminist.
I mean, sex is one of the things that you definitely can't do individually,
Right.
technically speaking.
No, he means it is beneficial for an individual themselves without necessarily being beneficial to the community.
Yes.
I mean, I don't know if that's true. Because, I mean, like, this doesn't Rabbi Sachs says about Epicurus and saying that if you think about the outcome of sex, of having a child, that's not necessarily good for you that can be detrimental for you as an individual because you have to pay the cost for rearing that child.
Right, but like I think if we took Epicurus today, he would say, "Yeah, there's no problem with sex. You can just get a vasectomy." Right? There are no risks today for. Oh, okay, I would say there's very little risk for sex today. The risks are emotional, at least.
I don't know if that's true either.
Besides, like, might not work in a Jewish context.
Emotional risk.
If you have a vasectomy, right, and you wear a condom, like you're mostly good.
I mean, you can make arguments about the emotional risk, any behavior that you do and you do it too much or in a certain way can be detrimental in other aspects of your life. You're doing that too much. You're not working. You're not making money. You're spending too much money. So it's like, I don't know.
Okay, right. That's a good point. Let me expand this out a little bit. He definitely says that like the idea of not getting married is individualistic. The idea of just only what does he say? He makes this whole big speech.
What page?
I'm trying to find that page.
I think I see what you're saying. I think I might have misunderstood your like overall argument before.
Oh, here we go. We can have both without love, love without compassion, and children without responsibility for their nurture. I'm gonna read.
What
I'm gonna
page?
read that. 167. When marriage breaks down, as it is done throughout the West from 1960 onwards, human bonds splinter and fragment into myriad of component parts, so that we can have sex without reproduction, birth control, and reproduction without sex. Techniques from artificial insemination to cloning. We can have both without love, love without companionship, and children without responsibility for nature. Each of these can be further fragmented so that even basic biological facts of parenthood become a complex set of options: genetic mother, host mother, commissioning mother, genetic father, mother's parent, same-sex partners, and so on. The permutations are open-ended, and parentally. So I say I think, like, though he doesn't say it outright, I think there is some truth that one night stand is something that is for the individual, right? And doesn't
Yes.
affect society, right? And we have marriage on the other side of this idea where it is long-term development that is good for the society.
Yeah, I think I misunderstood you before. Sorry.
I didn't say it right.
I'm going to make you say it one more time because my slow brain is staring at words on the page.
Okay.
So
Yes.
when marriage breaks down, as it has done through the West, tell me one more time. Why does he say it? So, you're saying he says it's good or not?
I'm saying that my point was that sex is for the individual, and we can think of a one-night stand is for the individual, while marriage is for the community. And he sort of separates this down where he's saying that the individual is picking what they like out of these relationships. So, for example, one of them is picking the idea of just euphoria, just one-night stands, and another of them is picking the idea of artificial insemination. So you're picking the idea of reproduction just for yourself, or you're sort of picking different, and then he goes to the bottom, you're picking different sort of social combinations that aren't marriage for your own self, for the individual rather than for the society. And you should have marriage as a goal because that is for the society. I hope that makes sense.
And I think he would argue it's better for the individual as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is why I was having trouble hearing what Trey was saying. One of the questions I've ventured over in CRC land is in terms of if you think a signed piece of paper is protection to provide all of the good that you just described, it isn't. And people are saying that in very negative ways in sort of the over on some of the other discords. I think marriage is an amazing thing. I think that we don't really appreciate it enough. It's like where it's like where I'm probably gonna. It's like where no, now I'm just trying to avoid words. Just because you stick a label on something doesn't make it so.
I agree. And I think that marriage today has lost its spiritual significance. I don't know about in other religions, but at least when I was a witness, what you would always do is you would not only ask like their father's hand, right? But each person individually will go to the person's pastors and get a recommendation on how they should be. As well as there's always a list of things that you should watch out for. And to me, even though that was a burden in some respects, it gave a ramp. And I don't think we have a ramp towards marriage. Like it's, oh, we've been dating this long, therefore we should get married. Not, I know these things about this person, I've done all these checks, then I should get married.
Or my mother's favorite line, I've married you girls off, my job is done. Tick.
Interesting.
Look, it's not crazy. It's like, how does this person act around their friends? How does this person act around their parents? How is this person's spiritual life? Like,
I don't think it's a bad idea. I've just never actually seen a marriage checklist before.
Which I think most people should have. Like, not crazy.
They used to put little booklets and stuff like that out when I was getting married. They would recommend things like that, and there'd be these things you could work through together, and you should go and talk to your pastor. And that was strongly vetoed.
We had to talk through things like that with our mentor couple.
You had a mentor couple?
We had a mentor couple. We met maybe once a month for like 6 months.
You are so lucky.
Before we got it was required for the church.
Really?
Yeah, every couple had to do it at the church where we got married.
I get the impression reading backwards through some of the synods, because I was reading backwards because of other reasons through some of the synods from the CRC, that there was a point in time when that process was also mandated there. Yeah.
All
Whether-
Catholic churches have like some form of marriage prep. I think my parents' parish was a little more gung ho about it than some others.
Mm.
Ben,
So-
what kind of checklist did you use to get married?
Use a spreadsheet.
I like that. Yeah, you actually had a spreadsheet, or you're joking?
No, but I've heard of people having a spreadsheet. Yeah.
I have heard, of people having spreadsheets.
I don't think I have a spreadsheet. Pretty crazy. I keep that on gnome.
I could see Colin doing that. He has a spreadsheet for most things. He likes spreadsheets.
Spreadsheets are useful.
Here's the
Okay,
rest.
I have to head out. But
All
this
right.
was great.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna put the.
I am supposed to be leaving
Wow.
early in the morning for Timmins. If anybody wants to know where that is, you can find it on the Greater Ontario map of the far north.
Have fun.
So,
Timmins
is that
is where I prayed that my son would live within an hour circumference of me and Jack in Cochrane, which is an hour north.
so? Timmins is where all the Tim Hortons come from.
No,
Oh,
no, Cochrane is where all the Tim Hortons come from.
so
Cochrane
why isn't it called Tim Cochrane?
because it already had a name when Tim Horton was born there, took up his hockey career, and became actually way more famous for coffee. It is the home of Tim Hortons.
Yeah, when I went to Canada, I had to go to Tim Hortons just to say I got a drink at Tim Hortons.
They have an actual kind of like museum thing to Tim Hortons up in Cochrane.
There is one thing I want to do in Canada.
Go to the Tim Hortons.
No, there's a toe shot. There's a pub where basically they take embodied and
Oh,
bombs
don't do that. That is so
Oh.
and they
disgusting.
pour a shot and
No,
you take a
don't
shot
do it.
from the toe.
Yeah, I've heard of things like that. That's gross.
I want to go there. That's
So apparently, Phlebas approves of Timmins.
And he is correct. It's halfway up. And so I am going, Phlebas, I am in September going to the opposite side of James, the little nub down in James Bay, to Chisasibi, which is where Jack died. And his previous teaching thing was far more to the top of the province. If you're really curious, you can look up where Salawi is.
Okay, I am going to end this broadcast because
Good night.
yeah. Good night.
Phlebas, sometime you come and have coffee
Good night,
with
everybody.
Kitchener. I'll come to Kitchener.